Good afternoon and welcome to World Economy. My name is Blyden Kim. And World Economy today, the key talking point is built around a World Bank as the World Bank lowers global growth forecast amid tariffs. We begin from there. The World Bank lowered its global growth forecast for 2025 to 2.3% from 2.7% projected in January, which would be the weakest in 17 years outside of the recession in 2009 and 2020. For 2026, global growth is seen at 2.4%, also below 2.7% previously expected. The bank said global growth is slowing due to a substantial rise in trade barriers and the pervasive effects of an uncertain global policy environment. It also added that if trade disputes were resolved with agreement that have tariffs relative to their levels in late May 2025, global growth could be stronger by about 0.2 percentage points on average over the course of 2025 and 2026. For the US, GDP growth for 2025 was revised lower to 1.4% from 2.3% seen in January. Forecasts for China were left unchanged at 4.5%. The Eurozone and Japan are forecast to both grow by 0.7%, a downgrade of 0.3 percentage points and 0.5 percentage point respectively. India's GDP is expected to grow 6.3% against 6.7%, and Mexican growth was also revised sharply, lower to 0.2% from 1.5%. Still on economic forecasts, the World Bank has revised its forecast for Thailand's economic growth in 2025 to 1.8%, a sharp downgrade from 2.9% projected in January. In its semi-annual Global Economic Prospects report, the World Bank cited higher tariff and heightened uncertainty as significant headwinds to growth. This follows similar downgrade revisions by the IMF in April. The World Bank expects Thailand's GDP growth to slow further in 2026, reaching just 1.7%. Last month, Thailand's National Economic and Social Development Council also cut its 2025 growth, the growth forecast, to a range of 1.3% to 2.3%, down from an earlier range of 2.3% to 3.3%. It lowered its export growth forecast as well to 1.8% from 3.5%, largely due to the impact of US tariffs. In 2024, the Thai economy grew by 2.5%, slightly below the official target of 2.7%. In Europe, the European Commission on Tuesday proposed an 18th round of sanctions against Russia over its invasion of Ukraine, targeting energy revenues, banks, and military industry. The package includes banning transactions with Russia's Nord Stream pipelines and expanding sanctions to 22 more Russian banks, including a full transaction ban beyond removal from SWIFT. It also targets banks in third countries and lists the Russian Direct Investment Fund (RDIF) and its affiliates. RDIF head Kirill Dmitriev criticized the EU, saying its actions show a desire to prolong the conflicts. The Commission also proposed lowering the G7 oil price cap on Russian crude from $60 to $45 per barrel. Meanwhile, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has said the cap will be discussed. It will be discussed at next week's G7 summit in Canada. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky welcomed the sanctions but urged more details and called for an even lower cap, the oil cap of $30. EU member states will begin debating the proposal this week. In China, China is moving to curb pork production to support prices and ease deflation pressures. Authorities have urged farmers to avoid expanding sow herds and to stop the secondary fattening of pigs, a practice that boosts meat output by raising pigs beyond normal slaughter weights. Pork, a key part of China's consumer price index, has seen wholesale prices fall nearly 10% since January, contributing to 4 consecutive months of deflation. Policymakers are especially focused on stabilizing the pork cycle after extreme volatility caused by African swine fever. With sow numbers at 40.38 million, above the 39 million deemed normal, farmers are now losing about 70 yuan per pig. Concerns about rural incomes and trade tensions with the US have also prompted China to extend an anti-dumping investigation into EU pork imports until December 16, citing the case complexity. Still on tariffs, a US federal appeal court has upheld President Trump's sweeping Liberation Day tariffs, allowing them to remain in effect while it reviews a lower court's ruling that blocked them. The lower court had found that Trump extended its authority. These tariffs affect most US trading partners, including Canada and China. Although the appeal court has yet to decide whether the tariffs comply with the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, it has temporarily suspended the lower court's ruling. On May 28, the US Court of International Trade ruled that only Congress has the power to impose tariffs and that Trump misused IEEPA, a law typically invoked for sanctioning foreign threats. Trump, the first president to use this law for tariffs, justified them as responses to fentanyl trafficking and trade deficits. Meanwhile, India and US negotiators made progress in trade talks in New Delhi on Tuesday, focusing on market access, tariff cuts, and non-tariff barriers, according to Indian officials. Senior officials from the US Trade Representative's Office and India's Trade Ministry, led by Rajat Agrawal, had closed-door discussions. President Trump and Prime Minister Modi had agreed in February to finalize the trade deal by fall 2025 and expand trade to $500 billion by 2030. An interim deal is expected by late June before Trump's 90-day pause of reciprocal tariffs, including a 26% tariff on India, expires. The next phase may address more complex issues, aiming for a first pack tranche by September or October. Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal, speaking from Switzerland, said India would tackle simpler issues first. India rejected US market access requests for wheat, dairy, and corn, but offered tariff cuts on almonds, pistachios, and walnuts. India also sought steel tariff exemption, which the US declined. Still looking at tariffs, the US and China have reached a trade agreement framework following 2 days of high-level talks in London. The deal follows a recent phone call between President Trump and Xi, which helped ease tensions after mutual accusations of violating the Geneva trade deal. In May, both nations agreed to a 90-day pause on reciprocal tariffs to roll back measures. A key part of the deal involves resolving China's restriction on rare earth exports and the US easing its recent tech export caps. Away from the tariff, and now there's a conversation about the future that says the future is Asian. Let's look at it. The world's economy has radically changed over the past decade. The Asian share of global GDP has risen from about 48% and is likely to be around 58% by 2030. Today, the Asian share of global GDP is 55%, whereas Europe and North America combined, now account for less, about 33%, an extraordinary change in a remarkable short space of time. Clearly, mostly a result of furious growth seen in China and India over the period, but mirrored by rapid growth in many other Asian countries. If GDP growth differentials between the continents continue at anything like the rate established between 2019 and 2024, Asian GDP is likely to account for around 58% of global GDP by 2030, as you can see. However, few economists believe that the difference in growth rate as seen in the years prior to COVID between the emerging economies of Asia and the developed Western markets will disappear, particularly in view of the current political problems of America and the uncertainty released by the vicious war launched in Europe by Russia's invasion of Ukraine. In summary, on trends visible to date, the rise of Asia is only unlikely to halt anytime soon. Let's look at these charts. The red indicating Asia. This chart indicating the percentage share of global GDP projected at 2030. While Asia is estimated to have about 58% of global GDP, and we're following by Europe at the percentage same, and the rest of the world, not America and the US. Now, talking about the US, a US inflation is likely accelerated. The annual inflation rates in the US are likely accelerated for the first time in 4 months, rising to 2.5% in May from 2.3% in April, the lowest level since February 2021, amid the early impact of President Trump's new tariffs. On a monthly basis, the consumer price index is expected to increase by 0.2%, matching April's gain. Meanwhile, annual core inflation is projected to edge up to 2.9% from 2.8%, and the monthly core consumer price index is anticipated to rise by 0.3%, marking the highest monthly increase in 4 months. And now let's look at the charts indicating United States inflation rates. The charts this morning. Looking at the chart this afternoon, our US inflation has been at a previous high of 3.3% in May, and began to slow down in that order to 2.4% in September before the quickened rise, rising back to 3% as of January 2024, and a slowdown. But after last month talking about April's 2.3% inflation seemed to be projected to rise to 2.4% in May. In South Korea, a jobless rate stays at 2.7% in May. South Korea's seasonally adjusted unemployment rate remained unchanged at 2.7% in May 2025, marking the third time this year it has held at that level. The number of unemployed individuals fell by 3.6% year over year, down 32,000, totaling 853,000 for the month. Meanwhile, employment figures showed growth, with the number of employed people rising by 0.8%, an increase of 245,000 to 29.16 million compared to May 2024. The labor force participation rate also edged up to 65.6% from 65.1% in April. And now to New Zealand. A visitor's arrival to New Zealand jumped by 18.8% year on year to 267,300 in April 2025. The largest increases came from Australia, up 33,800, the United Kingdom up 4,000, and the United States up 3,300, and Hong Kong up 1,600, while arrivals from Indonesia declined by 1,100. A multiple indication indicates that a sharp rise in Australian visitors was partly influenced by the timing of school holidays and Easter. Despite a strong annual growth, a total arrival in April 2025 was still 13% below pre-pandemic levels, reaching 87% of the 307,400 recorded in April 2019. An increase for visitors in New Zealand. And now we'll go on a quick break, and when we're back, world economy continues looking at China's car sales as it rises in May. Don't go anywhere.
Get ready for the exciting showdown, the biggest names, the toughest competition, and the most thrilling moments. From the gridiron to hardcore, and from the pitch to the track. Join us for Sports Central, the most electrifying sports program on television, every weekday from 11 a.m. to 12 noon on Spectrum Television. Sports Central, your home for sports.
Welcome back to your world economy. My name is Vladimir Kim. And now, before the closure of world economy, we dive straight into the different markets and see what the peculiarity of the market is this afternoon. First, we'll begin from the energy commodities amid prices of oil going back and forth. And now, let's start with the energy market, and afterwards, we'll look at the metal and agricultural market, and we'll transcend into looking at the financial markets, where we'll look at the state of Bitcoin in crypto market as well as the state of the euro against the US dollar market. Let's begin with the energy market this afternoon. The energy market. Energy market indicator prices of crude oil, US crude at 66 US dollars per barrel, upward by 1.287 point this morning, a 1.96 percentage appreciation for Brent, which represents Nigeria's price benchmark. A price level stands at 67 US dollars per barrel, upward by 1.087 points this afternoon rather, a 1.63 percentage appreciation. Natural gas, gasoline, all positive this afternoon. Quickly, let's look at the agricultural market. What the price of soybean is. Agricultural market indicates a soybean price at 1,060 US dollars per bushel, upward by 2.82 points, 0.27%, wheat price at 538 US dollars per bushel, upward by 3.37 points, and lumber price falling 1.08 points, and palm oil at 3,839 Malaysian ringgit per ton, downward by 25 points this morning. And now to the metal markets. The price of gold in the afternoon market stands at 3,339 US dollars per ounce, upward by 11.42 points, a 0.34 percentage appreciation. A silver price falling by 0.185 points at 36 US dollars per ounce. Copper price also falling, a negative 1.82 percentage decline. Steel price, no significant change in this afternoon's market. And now to the financial market. First, looking at the Euro USD market, and afterwards, we'll look at the state of the US dollar against African currency. The Euro USD market this morning. Price level stands at 1.14, a point mark for the euro against the US dollar. A slight gain for the euro over the US dollar, 0.39 percentage appreciation. And pounds against the US dollar at 1.35 points, a pound gaining 0.2% against the dollar. And now to the US dollar, a performance of the African market. US dollar against the African currencies. First is the Nigerian naira against the US dollar. US dollar against the Nigerian naira. Price level stands at 1,543 naira to the dollar at the international exchange window. The dollar falling against the naira this afternoon by 2.5 points, while the US dollar against the Zambian kwacha, a price level stands at 17 kwacha to the US dollar, the dollar gaining 0.016 over the kwacha. And we're talking about other conversation in this, or rather the South African rand at 17, not the kwacha. The South African rand at 17 rand to the US dollar, and the Zambian kwacha 24 kwacha against the US dollar, the kwacha falling, and significantly a negative 2.01% for the Zambian kwacha, the US dollar rather falling against the Zambian kwacha, the kwacha being stronger. Egyptian pound at 49.5 a pound to the US dollar. Not significant change in this one, but the dollar still falling by 0.02% against the Egyptian pound. And now let's look at the cryptocurrency market this morning as we close. A cryptocurrency market this afternoon, price level stands at 109,682 US dollar. A Bitcoin price are falling by 548 point this morning. Ether falling by 3.26 points, and Binance also falling by 3.9 points this morning at 669 US dollar. The price of Binance, a cryptocurrency, has been hitting all-time high in recent times, are falling. Is a story of the markets and the world of business and economy and the traction that comes with it. I here we draw the curtain in this episode of World Economy. My name is Vladimir Kim. Thank you for watching and thank you for being a part of it.